Today we're talking with several members of our congregation who are going to help us understand the Black woman's experience. And we have been very privileged to have them. This is part of a series of interviews we've done now. And someone asked me recently what our intention was. And largely is to educate and to motivate us to do something to make life better for, especially for the African American community, but for all of us. So I'm Newsom Holmes. I think y'all know that, but if y'all will introduce yourselves, please do.
Okay. I'm Barbara Johnson, and I've been a member of Unity for about 10 years now. And I am a prayer chaplain, and I've served in different capacities. But I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska, which makes me a Midwesterner, and people don't usually expect there to be any Black people there, but yeah, we are there. And so my experience is a little bit unique, but professionally I've done a number of things. I retired from the state of North Carolina, and I did do some diversity training while I was employed with the state. And I'm now a life coach, and I just got promoted to a diversity and inclusion counselor or coach. So,
great.
That's
Thank you.
about me.
Hello, my name is Tammy Jones, and I have been part of the Unity community for about 20 years. And I'm originally from Michigan. And in my professional career, I did executive and organization development. And part of that, I also did some diversity and inclusion work. So I'm very excited to be part of this conversation.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Reverend Cara Valentino. I've been a member of the Unity community for more than a decade and a member of Unity of the Triangle for about 10 years now. And I've been a prayer chaplain here as well as the prayer chaplain trainer, and currently lead weekly meditations for the church on Sundays when we are in session, of course, when the pandemic is not in force. And I also stood up a racial justice and equity team at the organization I work for. Part of my training has been getting a certified diversity professional certification, and I also do work in the community leading weekly meditations to do healing of race-based trauma and race-based traumatic stress for Black people. Super happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
That's great. Good. Yeah.
Hi, I am Dr. Andrea Emmanuel. Carr makes me say the doctor part. I think my greatest contribution to this community over the last 9 years happens to be my two sons, who are 15 and 16 years old. They are Solomon and Noah. In addition to having those two beautiful souls, I also have a background in community psychology, and that field of psychology focuses on how to improve the thriving of communities, typically communities that have been disenfranchised, thinking about prevention of mental, any kind of social ills rather than treating those. So I'm happy to be a part of this conversation.
As you can see, it's a stellar group of people here. Thank you for being here. Let me just start with an opening question, kind of a general question, and you can fill in as you want to. What are some experiences that have shaped your worldview as a Black person in America? And anybody who wants to jump in.
I'll jump in. So I think that I had an impact very young. I was 5 years old, and we had moved into basically an all-white neighborhood. And so one day, or one night, my mother came and she grabbed all of us and we ran down into the basement, and because there was a cross burning on our front yard. And so that was very traumatic. I remember it very vividly. We're hovered down there, and then I later found out that my father stood at the window watching, making sure that we were safe. And as a young person, it's just like, what? Why would this be happening? And overall, so I'll kind of bookend that. And so when I first moved to North Carolina, I drove to a city unnamed, and I was going to a gas station and walked into the store just to get a bottle of water, and there were 3 white guys, and they said, this store is for white people only. And this was really only 4 years ago.
Really?
So it's just a matter of my overall experiences as showing up as Black in this world. And I wake up every day to wonder what that will mean for me.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
There was an experience I had when I was younger, about 5, but I wasn't aware of what the context was, of course. When we talk about systemic racism, and this for me was a prime example in my life, when I was probably, actually I said 5, it was actually a little bit older. I was around in the 3rd grade, and I started school in 1980, so about 1983. I started noticing there were children who were being taken out of the classroom to go for some enrichment courses, and didn't understand what that was about. You know, in the 80s, of course, integration is well underway, but what was beginning to happen was a segregation within the school. So within the building, it was mostly white children who were being taken out of the classroom for these enrichment courses. And what my mother understood as an instructor in the school was that these kids had been deliberately tested, supposedly tested, and had proven that they deserved to have more enrichment. I had never been tested, and my mom said, whoa, 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 she's smart, why wasn't she tested? You know, or this, you know, my mom says I'm smart. But she had me tested, indeed, those tests proved that I deserved their enrichment according to their standards. But of course what that did was it started tracking children, so that by the time I was in high school, although the high school itself overall was 90% black, but the classes I was in were like 90% white. These advanced AP courses were 90% white. And so, you know, one thing I've always questioned is how many black students in that school overall were just kind of overlooked because their parents weren't aware of kind of what was happening in order to segregate these kids out. And I also know that continues to happen. I've had parents who've come to me who have students in my son's high school, and they talk about how their sons and their daughters their white sons and daughters are counseled differently to take other courses so that they're not with the, you know, general population, so that they can kind of segregate themselves and have better opportunities.
If I could just piggyback off that really quickly, I found that same experience around being in school and being in the advanced classes. Mm-hmm. And while it was, you know, the racial makeup was pretty diverse, all the classes I was in with basically white people. And then that created this whole situation of, okay, you're becoming culturally white because you're hanging around with all of the white people. And so then it's like you're just not accepted on either side, right? When you get that separation like that.
My experience has been a little different because I'm a couple of years older than these folks here. So I go back to like the late 50s going to school. And but growing up in Omaha, there wasn't enough of us to justify separate schools. So that was one advantage, really, it turned out for me, that we all went to the same schools. So my education was equal to the other kids, you know, the white kids as well. But that's as far as it went, as far as equality was concerned. So there was, you know, just very strict segregation. So we were on the north side, and everybody else was anywhere else they wanted to be. So we grew up I grew up in a very close-knit community, and all the adults, you know, just kind of parented. So you know, the idea about, you know, you're part of a village. This was truly my experience, and my mother was on welfare, so she had to sneak in work, and the welfare worker would come to your house to find out, you know, if she was there, and then you had to lie, and that's the way it was then, and that's what you had to do. But I'm grateful for the fact that I got a good education there. But once you're educated and you graduate and you're ready to start a new, start your career or to go further in life, couldn't do it there. Most of us have moved away. A lot of people from my original community live on the West Coast, and a handful of us live over here on the East Coast. But and there's a few that were able to assimilate there in Omaha, but very few. So we go back to visit. Most of us are living outside that community now. It was challenging. But you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And I didn't find out until I left there, that the kinds of opportunities that were available. So I was encouraged and excited because I found more opportunity moving, here. And I lived in DC for about 5 years too, and I could get almost any job I wanted. So my experience has been that, and that's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
So it's interesting that we've all sort of had different experiences. Each one of us have had such different lived experiences. You can look at me and tell that I am obviously mixed with something. I was born into a family, to a mother that was motherless because of the hatred of Black people and because of racism. My mother's white and my father is Black, and my mother's family disowned her and refused to see her or any of her children again because she had brown children. So I never got to meet any of my maternal family, ever. And that kind of heartbreak changes you, and you instantly know that you are not normal, that there's something wrong, inherently wrong with you, if an entire half of your family is not willing to see you because of your skin color. But if you look at me, you could say, well, maybe you don't really look Black, right? But I could probably pass for not Black, but I cannot pass for white.
That's a great point. Right.
So, and the way that I knew that is because the white communities that I was raised in, that my mother raised me in because she's white, so she raised me around people that looked like her because that's what she knew. And the horrors that I experienced in school, I was called every filthy, sexualized, derogatory term related to race from the moment I walked on school grounds until I left. And the beauty of that was that I quickly learned that I could test out. So I tested out of high school when I was 15. In California, it's called the CHESP, and it's actually more difficult than the current GED. So yeah, that was kind of my early experiences that have shaped my compassion and my passion for racial justice and equity.
Thank you all for telling your stories. I think one of the things that I've noticed, especially during this period of since George Floyd's death, has been this. I imagine it's true everywhere. This general awakening that white people are finally going, wait a minute, really, it is different, And we knew it was different, but I think as a whole we discounted it. It's been very poignant to hear the direct experience of other people, and to make that comparison to my experience, which has been dramatically different. We're on a short time period right now, but I did want to ask one more question, and I don't know if you can give this in a short period, but so how do you see your experience versus the white experience, the white privilege, the thought that we don't even think of it as privilege, I know that, just the normal, what I consider normal experience for me, looks like privilege to someone else. And so how do you contrast that, and just put a little twist on that in the end, how can we make it better, right?
I would say that when you have the conversation, it's around when white people say, I don't see color, right? And it's like, I have to see color because I wake up every day in this skin. And so I can't say I don't see color. And so one of the things that I would say that people could help is to actually see color. There are differences, and you benefit because of your white skin. Because of that, it's not that your life hasn't been hard. It's just that the color of your skin has not made it harder.
Andrea?
So one thing that I could have shared earlier was that my parents actually did not share with me that I was Black for a while. And I assumed that I was Native American because this is what that's who I identified with in the textbooks. It wasn't until 4th grade when they introduced the unit on enslaved people that I was like, oh, wait, I look more like them. So just kind of and their reason was, when I asked, I come home and I think I had my arms, I imagine I was just like, am I black? Why didn't you tell me, you know? And I think, I remember their response was because we didn't want you to have a chip on your shoulder. And I think that, you know, as Dr. Felicia Jenkins says, because of how the weight of being black in America, it just makes me too heavy to walk on eggshells. And so I think what Barbara was kind of hinting at before was like kind of this extra thing to do to make white people comfortable, to have conversations that are palatable to both of us, not coming out of that. I think that for me is like where the disparities begin. Not being able to have fully honest conversations, you know, about where I am, what I'm struggling with, you know. So for me, it's like you have the privilege of not having the weight.
Yeah.
In the conversation.
There's a term called microaggression that speaks to that. There are, and usually it's good intentioned people who say things that are really, you know, hurtful to us. And for me, I've absorbed it for the most part, because if you challenge it or if you bring it up, you're accused of being too sensitive. Or one is you're so articulate, or someone else is so articulate. It's like you're an exception, you know, and so that's what you hear, and you feel it. I feel it somewhere in here, but I just, you know, let it pass because I'm looking at the heart of the person, and I know their intentions are good and all of that. But I guess the older I get, the less I'm willing to absorb that. You can share some of this pain, you know, because I'm going to point it out. I may not always feel like doing that, but I've given myself more permission to do it these days, because I think you need to know. I think you need to know what is offensive, and you may not realize it. And so I think you know, this is a gift we're giving you to, you know, if you really want to understand and identify with our experience, we need permission, or we don't need permission, but I'm going to be more assertive about, you know, pointing things out. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I love Unity, because I love the diversity, even though, you know, it's a little out of balance right now. But I love diversity, and I think I love Unity's teachings about we're all one. Mm-hmm. And the better we understand each other. I mean, the more we understand each other, the better. And that's my new goal from here on out.
Thank you. Did you want to say something? We're over our time, but I wouldn't want to leave you out. So
yeah, I actually would, and I'm cut out of whatever of this that you need to. But I want to just name two things real quick, and one of them is, in answer to your question, is white fragility. And so white fragility is this inability that most white people have to have conversations like this without getting defensive or changing the subject or introducing the suffering of every other population except Black people. So I want to thank you for being willing to work through that, because talking about structural racism and the privilege that has afforded to white people, from access to from the Freehold Land Act in the 1700s to all of the different systems that have supported the acquisition of white wealth and the blocking of Black wealth, that has created a system of white privilege that is strictly wealth-based. And Dr. Darity from Duke University is an economist that has made his life's work the study of the racial wealth gap. And he says that if things continue the way that they are, that by 2050, the median Black income will be $0. So when you ask us what can be done, my ask is to use the white privilege that you have as a powerful spiritual leader in this community and a well-respected person in this community to ask members of our congregation and to ask the compassionate, open-hearted white people in our circles to begin to take some action in those spaces to take action in any of the institutions that have historically denied wealth from Black people and the institutions that have allowed and legalized brutality and murder against Black and brown bodies. That would be wonderful if that could happen. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So to conclude today, I will say that this has been a summer of education for me. Largely through watching a screen, it seems like that's the way we get together these days. Well, that's where most of my entertainment and education comes from. But it's really important to have real people in front of me, and I appreciate it very much. And I'm sure everybody else does. We want to thank you for being here. We'll do this again in just a few minutes, but we'll air it a week later. And so this is a way for our community to get to know how the other members of the community, how their lives are different, even though we share the same space on Sunday. Things seem very equal and calm and happy there, but that's not all of life. And so this is a great way for us to get to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll see you next week.